Hello, everyone, and blessings to you all. I'm so excited for today's video because I'm going to be diving into the depths of self-love. And I really want to speak into my own personal journey, my personal struggle with the path of self-love and the major misconceptions that I discovered along the way. And so I want to share with you my top 5 self-love misconceptions, which are actually really prevalent in our world. And yet so many of us overlook them and they become quite misunderstood, causing so many of us to actually experience a lifelong struggle and ongoing inner resistance to truly accepting and loving ourselves. And from what I've seen, these misconceptions cause us to struggle with self-love longer than we need to. And so we are at a critical juncture in our awakening process. There's so many souls on this planet that are feeling that call to explore a deeper connection with themselves, to heal emotions and traumas and release and resolve blocks to our higher potential so that we can experience a deeper sense of fulfillment in this lifetime. And I think that this is why the modern movement of self-love has gained so much momentum, especially in recent times, because we're really starting to acknowledge just how important it is, not only to our health and well-being, but to our personal fulfillment, our sense of happiness, and our deepest empowerment in our lives. And for many of us, self-love is starting to find its rightful place in our awareness and our daily practice. And as more time passes, we start to clarify the confusion that is and has been still clouding and distorting our interpretation and understanding of what it truly means to love ourselves. So I see this as a beautiful blossoming, this natural evolution of us as divine souls coming back to our eternal and original essence of who we really are. But before I dive into my top 5 misconceptions, I'd love to take a moment to share with you all a little bit about my personal struggles with self-love and how I overcame chronic and persistent self-worth issues that were with me for most of my life. So I have really vivid memories of my earlier years really struggling with my sense of self. And when I look back, I realize now just how highly sensitive I was, and to the point where I was unsure of how to regulate myself while being out there in the world. And like so many of us, I felt like I didn't belong here, I didn't fit in, and I was painfully shy. And I felt blocked from expressing myself. And that riddled me with extreme anxiety, which over time manifested as complex physical health issues. So I struggled with digestive and gut issues that I'm still experiencing today, and chronic skin problems that saw me unable to leave the house for weeks at a time. In my early 20s, my hair started to fall out due to the persistent stress and anxiety that I was experiencing pretty much on an everyday basis. And so my body felt completely out of my control. My body felt like it was against me, and this put me in opposition with it. And so I had multiple operations in my early 20s, again, which saw me berating my body. I just felt so deeply ashamed and unhappy with myself. I felt as though my body was flawed, it was broken, and I felt like nothing could fix me. It felt so conflicting trying to keep up with life whilst feeling this panic of anxiety coursing through me on a daily basis. Because my self-value had plummeted, not that it was ever high to begin with, but it was this feeling that I could just objectify myself. I could treat my body as though it were a machine, because in some level I was quite disassociated and quite numb. And so I kept pushing myself far too hard. I was working 90-hour weeks at one point and just really overdoing it. And my self-worth was very, very low for most of my life. And so that saw me attracting people and manifesting situations and circumstances that what I see now were actually a direct reflection of that worth. And all because my boundaries were thin, they were porous, they were non-existent at times, and because I didn't really have any footing in my own sense of self. And so I always felt less than, and as though everyone else around me was more valuable or more important than I was, and what they had to say was more important. I felt that others were seen and I was invisible. And I had so much to give others. I was always the first to help, always putting everyone's needs ahead of mine. I even made a career out of that as a nurse, as a disability and aged carer. And I completely lost myself along the way. I actually ended up with major burnout. So I was so invested in other people's happiness and people pleasing and taking care of everybody else except myself. And at the time, my poor self-worth was literally so consuming that I actually believed that anybody who acted confidently had an inflated ego. So when the idea of self-love came into my awareness in my 20s, I had such a surface perception of what it was. I thought self-love was all about pampering yourself with luxurious acts of indulgence and just splurging on expensive stuff. And it just felt all so artificial and unrealistic to me. And it felt so ungrounded and foreign. And so I resisted it. And as time passed, fast forward many years, my spiritual path really accelerated. And the idea of self-love started to morph. It started morphing and revealing itself in a new way. Its wisdom and its truth started to whisper to me in this deeper sense of clarity that was emerging. And so I started to have a better understanding of what I needed to do to love myself and how to overcome my self-worth issues. Yet, even when I consciously committed to this path of self-love and I felt clear on what I needed to do, I actually felt deeply disappointed that it wasn't coming easily for me at all. So it literally felt like I was climbing a mountain with the ground slipping away every time I tried to take a step up. And progress felt like it was really slow. I felt frazzled, I felt unmotivated, and it just caused me to feel really lost. So my path to self-love was that feeling that we sometimes get where we're taking one step forward and then we take 10 steps back. So sometimes I had a genuine and real glimpse of it, the feeling, the sense of it, the experience of self-love, these fleeting moments of true bliss and self-appreciation and just being comfortable in my own skin, those moments where I found my voice. But then I would slip back into my old habits with a very vocal inner critic that was really always putting me down and intensifying my insecurities. But slowly over time, things did start to change. And life itself really showed me the way. I was gifted so many countless opportunities to transform and overcome these emotional burdens, these self-worth issues, and really everything that was holding me back from being and expressing who I was truthfully, that essence that was always within me that just didn't fully know how to come forward. And even though I have a really beautiful and harmonious relationship with myself today, it is still an ongoing journey of devotion, of effort, of daily practice, and it does get easier. So we have to remember that self-love is not really the norm in our world. So it can feel like we're swimming upstream. It can feel like there is massive resistance to this cultivation of love within us, which is insane when you think about it, because it is who we truly are. It's what we're made from. It's the substance, it's the spirit, it's the energy, the presence of who we really are as divine beings. But of course, we've come into this separation experience. We've come into this 3D construct of density, forgetfulness, amnesia. And so we are moving through that right now as the veils dissolve, as we're starting to awaken to this inner truth. But it's important to acknowledge at the same time just how much power we really do have to shift our reality and return home to who we truly are as embodiments, as expressions of love itself. Okay, so here are my top 5 self-love misconceptions. Number 1, self-love is selfish and self-indulgent. So this is such a common belief in our society, and this has caused so much division amongst those who believe that self-love is a basic human necessity and our natural right, and those who believe that self-love is morally flawed, where they're comparing it to selfishness and narcissism sometimes and egotism. And even when you start digging in dictionaries for the official meaning of self-love, for example, dictionary.com, we have a meaning that goes like this. Self-love is the instinct by which one's actions are directed to the promotion of one's own welfare or well-being, especially an excessive regard for one's own advantage, i.e., conceit, vanity, narcissism. So no wonder so many of us have that perception of what self-love is as something selfish and self-indulgent. This generates a deep internal conflict because we worry that being true to ourselves by loving ourselves, showing up for ourselves, pouring into our needs, prioritizing ourselves, is somehow going to lead us to a spiral of self-indulgence, which we may associate with gluttony or selfishness. And so we may feel that putting our own needs first will cause us to neglect others around us. And of course, gluttony and self-centeredness is frowned upon in our society. And as an extreme opposite, many are denying self-love, believing that self-denial and self-sacrifice is more noble and more virtuous, and that action of putting others first and forgetting about ourselves, allowing our needs to trail behind, somehow makes us a more noble, a more virtuous, a kinder, a better person. And so this causes us an inner disconnection. We get burnt out so easily when we do this. We get depleted. And this actually feeds a very, very vicious cycle of self-indulgence, because it's when we're in that state of disconnection, when we're frazzled, when we're spread so thin, that we actually turn to those patterns of self-indulgence. So you can think of it like the advice that you get when you're on an aeroplane traveling to another country. They always tell you to put on your own oxygen mask first, because you can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself. And so it's important to highlight that self-indulgence actually stems from a lack of self-love. The feelings of not being good enough or feeling unworthy causes us to feel a deep sense of lack. It literally creates an energetic hole within us, which then causes us to turn to indulgence as a means to fill that hole. And so this is the dynamic that causes us to overdo it. It's causing us to prioritize and to seek out immediate gratification or pleasure over our long-term health and well-being. And this is because we're seeking temporary relief to cope with these underlying and internalized feelings of inadequacy or worthlessness. And so this is how we try to mask our deeper issues. We're avoiding genuine self-reflection and the difficult emotions that need to be seen and heard. And so on the other hand, self-love involves truly appreciating, honoring, and respecting ourselves. It involves caring and tending to ourselves in a balanced and nourishing way, with an awareness that takes into consideration our long-term well-being and happiness, not just the instant gratification of how can I make myself feel better and how can I fill this hole within me. And so it's in this sense that self-indulgence can actually be quite destructive and set us back even further. It's masking and covering up the internal burdens we carry with us, whereas self-love actually sustains us through life. It brings us intimately inward to ourselves with this honest connection and communication with our interior feelings and the things that are happening inside of us, which leads us to lasting joy and peace. And then from that center point of you in your own life really ripples outwards into your relationships and elevates your sense of fulfillment in life. Number 2, lack of self-love is easy to identify. So this is another common and often overlooked misconception, because poor self-value is actually quite challenging to identify within ourselves. You may have noticed that it's quite obvious and easy to perceive it in other people around you. But when it comes to seeing it and identifying it within ourselves, it can be very, very difficult. So lack of self-love often will go unnoticed in our lives. It's often a quiet force of destruction within us. It's not always manifesting as this huge offensive attack towards ourselves. It's more often than not more of a background numbness, which blocks us again and again from loving ourselves. And because so many of us are so accustomed to our own negative self-talk, it does become so ingrained, this toxicity that's permeating not just our thoughts and our mind, but every part of ourselves. And it just becomes our normal, maybe even our identity. We may not even realize that we are rejecting who we are on a daily basis. It's just on autopilot. And so this can really manifest as a subtle internal block, a persistent barrier where these ingrained beliefs and negative conditionings that we go through are really hindering our capacity to truly accept and love ourselves unconditionally. And for many of us, this is actually an unconscious form of resistance that's trying to protect us. And it's doing this through avoiding past traumas and unresolved issues that we're carrying within us. Very much in the same way that self-indulgence is masking these negative emotions or these heavy feelings of pain and grief within us, these unresolved issues. And so again, it becomes a point of avoidance and distraction. Number 3, self-love is a given. This is an interesting one because I've noticed just how much we have this belief within us, this deeply programmed belief that somehow we're just meant to know how to love ourselves from the very beginning. But self-love is not something that we are just magically granted in our lives. We must consciously work at it and practice it and cultivate and develop it within our lives. And so it involves making conscious choices and taking real action that strengthens our compassionate connection with ourselves. It is not just a quick fix, and it is not an easy way to just escape the conditions of reality that are uncomfortable. It requires genuine intention, effort, and commitment, especially when it comes to things like practicing gratitude and setting healthy boundaries and investing in your own needs and self-care practices. And self-love is not a given because as children, most of us were never taught the value of loving ourselves. We were never really guided as to how to implement healthy boundaries or to speak our truth freely and honestly in a safe and nurturing space of receptivity. And if we had that, we were the lucky ones. And so if we didn't see our parents or caregivers loving themselves or caring for themselves, doing the inner work, sitting with their emotions, prioritizing their own needs, taking care of their bodies, likely we didn't learn how to do that for ourselves either. And if our parents didn't model it to us, and we all know that it's not taught in schools, which it should be, then we may have no reference or example at all for what it really means to love ourselves. And combine that with generations upon generations of self-denial, self-sacrifice, and heavy ancestral patterns which have influenced our present-day perspectives, we can see just how much of the pain of our ancestors we've been carrying. This lack of self-love probably didn't start with us. And so these are the rigid confines of the narrative that we are just so accustomed to in our world. And again, many of us don't question that. It just becomes the norm. The anti-self attacks, self-depreciating attitudes. So we need to be compassionate and patient with ourselves and really start to take this incredible opportunity that we have right now in our spiritual awakening to move our focus inward, to really tap into our own hearts and our own unique inner truth, to discover the love that is and always was our natural right and divine essence. And that was with us all along, whether or not we could perceive it or feel it. And so many of you may find yourself going through the motions of these intense times right now. And you may be awakening to that deeper awareness within yourself. And you may be coming to terms with this inner disconnection, this separation within yourself, and how it came to be that you fell out of love with yourself and your own existence in the first place. And so this is a time where many challenging yet beautiful realizations are emerging on our path of healing and awakening, our greater mission to be the best version of ourselves. Number 4, self-love is a blissful journey. So many of us have the perception that the path to self-love is always going to be blissful and joyful and make us feel elated. But more often than not, the path of self-love is really, really tough. And it requires strength. It requires stamina to navigate its complexities and fluctuations. And so it is not a quick fix. It's actually a deep, gradual, and oftentimes uncomfortable process that involves so much more than just our minds. This is not just a concept. It's not a theory. It is a devotional commitment to yourself and a development of an authentic inner relationship, a total reconnection with all that you are. And it's a vulnerable exploration of our emotions, our memories of the past, our life story, and of course our physical bodies as well. And because we usually have such a rich and reinforced history of unkind and unloving self-treatment, then walking the path towards self-love can uncover such deep pain within us. It can uncover feelings of rage, shame, and deep agony within us as our inner world becomes a steady point of focus in our lives. It's like we stop looking outside for distractions or looking outside for answers, and we really choose to commit and to come back in touch with our unprocessed traumas, our emotions and limiting beliefs that are really what are generating that sense of numbness, that lack of vitality, that feeling of confliction within ourselves, the negative thought forms, the low self-worth. And it's about holding space for ourselves. So many of us are such great space holders for others. We're great listeners, we give great advice, but how often are we doing that for ourselves? And so the strength that it requires to move along the path of self-love is really what comes from being responsible for our own lives and how we feel. It's the empowerment that comes along with shifting out of a state of victimization, that life is happening to me and I can't seem to transcend that, into this space of accountability where we can really start to make leaps and bounds on our path. And so the vibration of real love, the energy, the presence of real love is very revelationary. It reveals hard truths about ourselves, truths that we may have been avoiding or denying our whole lives to cope, to get by. And we have all made mistakes in our lives, but we can learn to relate to them with compassion and kindness. And we can actually start to dissolve that illusion of a mistake being a mistake and start seeing them not as mistakes, but amazing opportunities to grow in awareness, to change, to make amends, and to learn. And so again, with the accountability and responsibility, self-love is not about letting ourselves off the hook. It's about recognizing where we still have room to grow. So it's about acknowledging our weaknesses rather than just blindly adoring our own strengths and focusing only on our strengths. So real love is what's the encouraging force that helps us to address our own problems with honesty, with gentle compassion as we take one step at a time on the path to become that best version of ourselves that we know is possible. And so it's about acceptance. It's about really welcoming your weaknesses and shadows, bringing them out of the dark of repression, of being disowned and denied, and really allowing them to come into the light of recognition, where we honestly understand where we still have room for growth. And so it's how we become aware of our blind spots and limitations and meeting them with compassion rather than self-criticism. because that criticism is again going to feed into the separation within us. It's going to cause us further suffering and feelings of failure, which again just pin us against ourselves. So there's a wisdom within love. There's an ancient master, a guide, a teacher that is showing us that the way home back to self is often filled with hurdles and unexpected turns. It's not an easy fix, and we can't just rush to the destination as a means of feeling better. That pursuit of feeling better is valid, but the journey is more about taking it step by step. This unraveling path which will bring us closer and closer to ourselves and restore that love that we always were. And so it happens moment to moment with small and consistent steps. That's what makes the biggest impact on our journey to self-love. 5, self-love is only about me. So this misconception stems from this either-or thinking mentality. It's either me or you. It's either this or that. It's really the duality of the mental mind. And so it's that belief that by focusing on yourself and pouring into yourself, that somehow you're taking away from others if you do that. So it's the belief that we have to choose between ourselves and the other people in our lives. We feel like we can't have both. And so this can feel like an impossible choice, especially for highly empathic and caring people, especially those who are in the role of caring for others, or those who just feel deeply about the well-being of others. And so it's that conundrum. If I choose myself, am I leaving them behind? And the thing here is that no one is inherently separate from each other. We're all connected with the world around us, with our children, our family, our loved ones, our community, our friends, our colleagues and workmates, etc. And so it's this illusion of separation where we have this fear and worry that choosing ourselves will take away from our capacity to love and support others. Yet, when we really think about it, someone who truly loves themselves is actually a powerful presence in this world. And so self-love, although it seems very self-fulfilling, actually has everything to do with our greater path of service and positive impact in all that we're here to offer on our paths, whether we're a mother, a parent, a carer, a light worker, a therapist. We're never doing good to anybody by neglecting our own needs. And we're not taking anything from anyone by honoring ourselves first. In fact, the more we pour into ourselves, the more replenished we are, the more vitality, life force, and energy we're actually going to have from a place of surplus rather than a place of burnout and depletion. So this means we can show up in more powerful ways. And so we really must understand self-love in all of its dimensions and domains, not just skimming the surface of self-love as a concept or a theory, the way that I used to perceive it, but a daily truth that is transforming us at the core of our being, that's really reuniting us with our own essence and our own divine nature. And this is where we're going to uncover and remember our greatest empowerment, our greatest truth. And from that point of connection, from that point of authenticity, everything in our external reality and our lived experience is going to be elevated. We will shift and transform into our full power and potential because we are reunited, we're in union with ourselves. This is sending a signal, a wave of harmony through every avenue of our lives. And life just becomes so much more graceful, so much more beautiful when we are in connection with who we truly are, when we stop fighting ourselves, when we stop belittling ourselves, picking on every minor flaw and generating that civil war within the parts of us. And so this is why this time is so incredibly important. Without self-love, really nothing else is going to take shape on the spiritual path. This is really the basis of what everything is waiting to accelerate upon: our sense of purpose, our sense of empowerment, our connection to source consciousness, the clarity of where we're heading in life, our power, our vitality, our strength to be able to manifest, to create meaningful relationships. So it is always going to start with ourselves. We know that we live in a holographic reality. The universe works as a feedback mechanism. So we must learn to love ourselves so that we can have an experience of love with the world around us, with life itself. And so these are my top 5 self-love misconceptions. And I hope that by speaking into these myths and misconceptions, that you will experience as well a deeper understanding of yourself and your own perception of what self-love means to you. And so for those of you who feel ready to deepen their connection with self-love, I'm really, really excited to be offering my brand new self-love package to help you to overcome resistance to loving yourself. And this self-love package is really everything that I wish that I had access to when I began my own personal journey to self-love. It is a source of light, it's a source of guidance, and it really is a path back to you. For those of you who feel like you're stumbling in the dark, things are confusing and uncertain, and you may just not know where to begin, this is a package just for you. And wishing you endless peace, happiness, joy on your path. And ultimately, as you come back to self-love, this beautiful feeling of relief and that sense of you've finally come home. This is what it's all about.